Well, folks, here we are, and sorry about the slight confusion on the old countdown. I've got a very touch-sensitive screen here that I'm controlling for the streaming part of this today, and I actually touched it in error, and guess what? It reset the timer, so sorry about the confusion. Anyway, we are on time, and I can confirm that Edwin is in the room, so that's good. And just before I bring Edwin in, I will just highlight the fact that the studio is up and running. This is actually the new look studio. It's not completely built yet. There's a lot more work to do, but nevertheless, it's beginning to take some form of shape now. And whoa, that's interesting. Wish I hadn't done that. Okay, let's go back to that. Go back to that. Go back to that. That should fix that. Right, so we'll try and do that again, shall we? I'm doing manual stuff at the moment, and unfortunately, manual stuff sometimes means I push the wrong button in the wrong sequence. I will get the automation sorted out quite soon because it will make everything much easier. But one of the other things that we can do is to begin to take account of the fact that there are doggies in the house. And just to give you a bit of a sense, if I move the camera down, guess what? We have doggies in the house. There we go. So the doggy cam is now back and acting okay. So there you go. The dogs are quite asleep at the moment. Luna in front, Meteor behind. So that's a little bit of a sense of what's going on there. We will visit them on the way back. But anyway, without further ado, let me bring Edwin in. Edwin, how are you doing?
Well, Martin, but I just want to also let you know that I'm touch sensitive as well. So,
okay. Well, that could be. I'll tell you what. I've got. Oh no, which one is that, Edwin?
this one's Dusty.
Okay, jolly good.
She did a bit of rent bidding on the weekend.
Excellent, very good. And I gather you've invaded their space for tonight. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I had to. The other studio's too cold, Martin, and it's getting a bit cold down up here in the mountains.
Yeah. I tell you what, I've had the warm weather the last few weeks. It's been amazing. For the last 5 weeks, we've had sunshine, mid-20s, middle of summer in the UK. So I've nicked your warm weather for the minute.
Yeah, good luck to you. You're going to need it when make the most of it because you're going to need it in the winter that you're going to get coming up.
That's probably right. Well, the people are now talking about the gas price potentially being high again, and all sorts of those things. That energy prices in the UK have come down a bit. Anyway, what I wanted to do was to spend a bit of time with you tonight, Edwin, specifically talking about when property goes wrong, because there's a lot of chatter about property, and you've got to buy. It's property prices always go up. But of course, it's all about if you buy the right property. And quite often, you and I know that if you buy the wrong property, you can actually end up with a nightmare. And that nightmare doesn't go away very quickly. It can be actually a very disastrous experience. So what I wanted to do was to chat with you about some of those experiences and try and perhaps help people navigate this rather complex environment.
Look, by all means, I'm open for questions and anything you want to talk about. Well, I've sent you some photos and some videos of inspections that we've conducted, in the past, and some are very interesting. It's interesting how more so now than ever, there's very strong relationships, or very dangerous relationships, between the real estate agents and the building pest inspectors. And it's all come about by the policy that the previous government brought in, with regards to underquoting and trying to make it a bit more fairer for buyers, and for buyers to spend less money when they're buying. But unfortunately, what that's done is the real estate industry has taken that and created an arrow, created a sword, created a weapon. They've weaponized that against the purchasers, and this relationship that the building inspectors and selling agents have is very dangerous. More to the point, is because many buyers are relying on these building and pest reports, and a lot of them, quite frankly, aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Right, and let's just unpack that slightly more, Edwin, because of course, typically in Australia, when you actually talk to an agent and look at a property to purchase, the agent will have a bundle of documents, and it'll include a contract. It will probably include a vendor's survey and other bits and bobs, right? And they sort of hand that across to you and say, well, here you are, this is what you need. But the problem with that is that it really isn't as objective and independent as it needs to be. And I mean, my own experience quite recently was I had an agent say to me, well, you should get an inspection for the sale of the property. And he said, well, you can tell pretty much the surveyor what to say. I said, really? Is that how it works? I didn't know that. And he said, well, it's part of the marketing effort. And I was thinking, well, that's a bold assertion. But I guess the question is, are those vendor-driven reports worth more than the paper they're written on?
Look, it's a very prickly pear, right? Because on the one hand, the building inspector doesn't really want to break or be too tough on the agent that feeds them, inspections or work on a weekly basis, right? So they're going to be lenient by sheer nature, right? It's because you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. Now, a lot of people say it's they're at arm's length, but are they really? Is the question, and no different to the experience that you've had. We see it all the time, and I've got reports from agents or building pest inspectors working in the same office that are on the same house. One commissioned by the vendor and one commissioned by myself. And the chalk and cheese. One notes that there's no structural defects of the property, and the one that I commissioned brings out three structural defects, and one of them being a extremely major structural defect. We're going to see a video of one of the properties, that particular property, and that's in the North Shore. I mean, this property is worth close to $3 million, if not more now. So that's just one. But there are multiple stories that I could go on about in reference to the difference between the vendor's report and the ones that we obtain through our preferred building and pest inspectors. And the reason why we get an independent building and pest inspector, because if we feel that the agent and the owner are willing to negotiate, after I inspect all the properties for all our agents, and if it passes my test, and the vendor and the agent are willing to negotiate on anything further, and obviously you've got to supply them with a document that the agent can refer to. Well, then we go in and we go and get our own building and pest inspection, independent, so that we can also have something to fight with, something to joust with, right? With the vendors and the selling agents, and also we also get it for insurance purposes moving forward. Now, going back to the scenarios where you've got building and pest inspections, and they purposely omit, or the agent tells the inspector to overlook or close his eyes when doing the report over certain things. Well, you know what? There's my understanding is that there's a 6-year tenure on statute of limitations, that purchasers that believe that they were wrongly advised by the agent, as well as by the building and pest inspector that the agent relied on, and the report that they got given. And if it's been assigned to them, in their name, when they purchase the property, well, they can take them to task. Look, I know of 3 cases over the last 12 months that building inspectors have been taken to task, along with agents, and the parties that have taken them to task have been successful, from obtaining between 35,000 and another one 120,000, from making claims against those dodgy reports that they relied on.
Yeah, and that's an interesting observation, Edwin, isn't it? Because effectively there is a legal obligation. I guess the question is, if the surveyor's report is effectively part of the contract bundle, and the agent doesn't actually make any direct representation with regard to that particular survey, then what is the status of that document? Is it effectively worth anything? Because of course the vendor's paid for it. There's no direct legal relationship between the surveyor and the prospective purchaser that I can see. So it seems to me that this is an area where the law actually really is a bit blind as to what the original intent was. The original intent was to protect prospective purchasers and give them at least a stake in the ground. But what's happened is that these building surveys have become more and more part of the marketing campaign. And I agree with you. If the agent makes specific representations, either directly or indirectly, then you might possibly have recourse. But if they don't, if they just hand it out as part of the bundle, and if you as the prospective purchaser take that on board and use it as part of your decisioning, I'm not sure you have any recourse.
Look, you do have recourse if you feel that look. First of all, the building and pest inspection report has to be assigned to the party that bought the property, in order for you to have a chain of custody, and in order for you to have recourse and have a claim against the building inspector. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily join the agent if if the agent's just given it. But look, by default, the law. Look, this isn't legal advice, obviously, but any lawyer that's worth a grain of salt will tell you join both parties. And see who quivers at the knees at the end of the day. And most of these matters don't go to unheard. They're resolved by way of mediation, and hence the reason why there's not a lot of case notes as to the many claims that have been made. But look, I have a feeling and a suspicion that there's going to be a lot more cases that are going to be brought up before the tribunal, and possibly going to the Supreme Court, because we're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Again, we're going to be discussing one of the inspections, one of the videos that I sent to you, and I'll explain in detail as to what the building inspection report noted, and what you can see. You don't even have to be Mr. Magoo to be able to see the faults around the property and the issues that the property would have. But yet the building report, when we read it, brought nothing to the attention of the prospective buyer. So there are omissions that are so blatant that fall within a dereliction of duty.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good to know. And but I guess the general advice would still be, and again, we're not giving specific advice, but generally, I would say if you're going to buy a property, you should definitely get your own independent survey done. One, because it gives you a leverage point if in fact there are issues that you can negotiate, and two, it gives you some security and insurance into the future. And Three, if you find that there are major issues, you can walk away.
Oh, definitely. Look, definitely. And obviously, the fourth point to that, Martin, is if you are interested in the property, make notes along the way. Make notes in your diary, make notes in send messages to the agent via text, via email. Put as much as you can in writing. It will all benefit you and support your story at the end. Should you be one of the poor bastards that went and bought and major defects weren't disclosed, and within 6 months to 12 months you're up for hundreds of thousands of dollars in rectification work. So yeah, look, that's just but as you said, first and foremost, you just don't rely on the reports handed to you by the agent, and you and only believe 90% of what the agent's telling you anyway in the first place.
90%, that's generous for some agents. Others probably okay, but yeah.
I know there are real estate agents watching, Martin, so I have to be careful.
No, fair enough. And yeah, not I can always say not all agents are the same. There are some really good ones there that actually do the right thing all the time. There are others that are perhaps a little less careful about things. But look, you in yesterday's rant made the wonderful observation that you go into a viewing, and there are 20 or 40 people walking around and they're looking at the nice shiny taps and they're looking at the new renovations here and there, right? But they're not looking up, they're not looking down. And so you've got this interesting situation where, in fact, I reckon that people are inspecting each other more than the property themselves, and they're sizing up the people who might be actually, bidding against them, etc., etc. So I guess one question I've got is, can you, as part of an standard open inspection, find out enough, or do you actually have to go through a separate process to really have a dig around and dig into the basement and dig into the roof space? Because obviously you can't do that when there's an open house going.
Oh, look, I do it anyway, Martin. Whether there's an open house, if I got the opportunity, I'll crawl under a house or get in a manhole or whatever. It's just if the opportunity arises. I mean, it's. I also use that as a bit of a tack as well. If our clients are really interested in the property, and I see some people that look at they look like they've got deep pockets, but they've got more money than sense. I try to say. Bring something to their attention, or direct their attention away from the shiny taps and the and the 40 millimeter Caesar stone benchtop to some issues, whether I tap on tiles or whether I shine the torch in the direction that I want them to see, or I'll get under the house and and tap from underneath. I mean, I just got to do it. But yeah, look, that's to have a quick general look in between inspections. But most of our guys and myself, most of the time is spent on our own. We'll get a private inspection if we see that the property's got legs, and we're going to potentially make an offer on behalf of our client, and that's when we really try to get to see as much of the property as possible, because you can't see it on the open home inspection, and not now, not in these times anyway. You can you don't get to see what you really want to see and spend the time, because it takes about, in some cases it's taken us anywhere between, when we get there early, it could take us 5 to 10 minutes just to walk into the bloody place, because of the line that we've got to wait along, because there's just that many bodies in an apartment or a small house.
Well, certainly when I was a building surveyor many years ago, and we were asked to do a proper structural survey, that's 2 to 3 hours of detailed digging around and kicking this and pulling that, and climbing up into the roof space, and going into the basement or into the voids. My point is that it's it is quite an extensive thing if you want the full job. Now, of course, there are other types of surveys that do a little bit of a less detailed inspection, and I think sometimes people are a little bit misled because sometimes these cheaper alternatives are done much more quickly, and they use pretty standard structured responses in the report you get, which is pretty much, if not AI generated, well, at least computer generated, and so quite often I think those don't necessarily give you that much. But again, it's horses for courses perhaps. But the other question I had for you, Edwin, was this idea of getting a separate report for a property. Would you say that this is true whether it's old or whether it's new, whether it's a unit or whether it's a house? Even if it's a relatively brand new or off the just completed, is it still worth getting this independent view?
Look, when you're spending on average now, say an apartment on average across Sydney around the $800,000, this is an average across the board, and the average homes are now at fetching just under 1.5 million. A $650 investment is cheap in comparison, right? So, and it's a look. You'd get it either way. The only times that you could say that we won't get an official report ourselves will be if we're of the understanding that our client is going to fully renovate the house anyway, depending on the extension of the renovations, right? Most of the issues are centered around bathrooms, the wet areas, and depending on what type of building it was, whether it's built on a slab or whether it's built on piers. I mean, then there are other things that we look for. But look, across the board, I would recommend everybody, if you're going to look at the report in the first instance that the agents are providing and the vendors providing. It's usually only going to cost anywhere between $45 and $65 to obtain the report, and you pay the balance if you buy the property and you get it assigned to you. But you look at the report, and if the report has very few pictures or not a lot of photos to reflect what the findings are, you can be assured that the building inspector hasn't spent much time in there. Our inspection reports come with heaps of photos because they are the instructions that we give our building inspectors that we utilize around Sydney. And for us, it's very important because it's the nature of the business itself. It's very difficult to explain certain things to purchasers and to our clients as well at times. And as they say, a picture paints 1,000 words. Now, not only that, but we also are able to compare our reports with lots of pictures to the agent's reports with very few pictures, and that generally has the stigma of the agent or the owner or the building inspector trying to hide things anyway. So when we compare it with ours and we show the agent, and a lot of agents, a lot of agents don't know what they're selling and don't know and don't really care. They're just order takers, as many Twitters put up on Twitter. And it's understandable because they're very ignorant of the product that they're selling or that they're representing. So it's very important. I see that a lot of people that buy apartments fail to obtain building reports, understandably, because they feel that most of the common areas are going to be taken care of the owner's corporation. But isn't it more important for you to understand the defects around the common areas anyway? Because at the end of the day, you're still going to be paying. You're still going to be allotted a certain figure that is apportioned to you depending on your lot size, will be apportioned to you as as part of the owners corporation that you will have to contribute to the special levy. So it's important to understand, to know that. You could talk, tens of thousands of dollars in some cases, in properties over at St Ives at the moment. We know of a building where the special levies are clocking 160,000 per unit. So it's a lot to fork out after you bought the property. But a lot of people fail to do that, and there's also the responsibility on the inside of the unit is yours as an owner. Now, in some cases, the owners corporation will take care of waterproofing issues, but that's the waterproofing issues in the bathrooms, and that's if it's in the bylaws that the owners corporation will take care of waterproofing issues. But once you start dealing, you've got to demolish the bathrooms, and you've got to demolish shower recess areas in order to get to the waterproofing, right? So there's going to be a big mess left behind that you're still going to have to fork out some money to clean up. So, but they feel complacent, and they don't get the full a proper building report. Unfortunately, I can understand pest in a strata complex, but building, I think it's paramount. But a lot of people that don't understand, and I'm talking about people that don't understand, that don't have an understanding or general understanding of building and construction and the issues that could occur. If you fall into that category, by all means, you should be getting a report, whether it be new, old, established, 100 years old, or just built yesterday. And I think, if anything, anything that was recently being built and it's being sold as new, you definitely get one, and just for safekeeping, get a second one as well.
Absolutely. Well, I absolutely agree that it's just really important, and it's just worth thinking about it, because you've got basically the building structural survey, and then you've got electrics, and then you've got things like drains and what have you, pests. I mean, there's a few different dimensions to this, and for example, when I bought my property in Thurul, one of the things that I asked them to do was to do a check of the amount of radiant heat coming through the ceiling, because it was actually a steel roof, and I was concerned lest there was lack of insulation. Now, that's not a standard piece of inspection that's done as a standard building survey, so I actually had to get somebody with a specific tool to be able to do that. But I just wanted to confirm that actually it had been built properly. So you can begin to create quite a long list of different things you want to check off. I mean, how far do you go, Edwin? Is there a diminishing returns, or is it really important to check all of the boxes?
Look, I think I'll make a suggestion: check as much as you can. Our building inspectors, on average, would spend an hour and a half. That's on average. Sometimes it takes them 2 hours. Sometimes it takes them 2.5 hours. I mean, the selling agents get really pissed off with them. But at the end of the day, it's a job that they've been paid to do, and they do it. And the agents have got to give access, and reasonable access. And as far as we're concerned, however long it takes to get the report done is reasonable access. Now, because and the reason why they get pissed off with our building inspectors that we use when we're serious, about a property, is because they're only used to building inspectors that they use to provide those reports on behalf of their vendors. They're only used to anywhere between a 20-minute to half an hour inspection of the property, and this is the difference. So you can imagine what you're going to pick up in half an hour, and as opposed to an average time of 1.5 hours to 2 hours. There's going to be it's going to be a lot more thorough, and there's going to be a lot more more eye for detail. Look, there are a lot of things that are omitted in a lot of the building reports. Like you said, how far do you go? Well, I guess the requirement isn't as may not be, it's not as thorough as what it is in a lot of European countries where you obtain building reports because of the the seasons are so harsh that you've got freezing winters and hot summers and the like. But look, come November this year, the efficiency ratings of new builds have to get above 7 now. So that's going to put a lot of onus on that rating and that efficiency. And any renovation that's being done that's worth more than $50,000 is going to come under that new mandate that's going to hit the building industry. So I dare say that with that will also come the reports. Potentially, you are going to get some sort of efficiency ratings with regards to how much heat or how much you're losing or how much heat the property is absorbing. So you're going to have to get more specialist building inspectors. But what we're seeing of late, Martin, is the opposite as to what's required of the building industry. And that is that we've got people from the IT industry joining to become building inspectors, and they've got no clue. They've absolutely got no clue. And yet there's a major company that starts with the letter J and just about franchises everything under the sun. They're employing people from the IT industry, and they're selling them franchises. And these guys never nailed a 4B2 together. Don't know the difference between a roof tile and a floor tile if it's smacked them in the head. And these are the people that are now going to be contracted out for you to obtain a building and pest report when you're buying a property. And in one particular case, this individual that just bought a new franchise from one of my contacts that was actually training him he's going to specialize in new builds, and he's going to be telling people that are buying inspecting the homes for people that are buying the new homes, the house and land and house packages, and this guy, like my mate says, this guy just doesn't have a clue, but yet he's bought a franchise and he's going through a 4-week training course, and he's out there going to be dishing out building inspection report, building and pest reports, and good luck to the people that unfortunately come across his path.
Well, it makes you ask the question, doesn't it, about can you trust the people doing the report? And it's very important that you find a reputable firm and have the right certifications and things, because it's a pretty critical issue. And I've seen a few conversations in my one-on-one series where people got a report, but it was actually from somebody who really didn't know what they were talking about. And in fact, in each case, I suggested they go and get a different report from somebody else, which they did. And as a result of that, they then actually claimed the feedback from the first report, because basically it was completely useless. So, shop around. Now, Donna actually asked a question a little while ago, which I just want to switch before I come into some of the more detailed conversation points. And Donna, thanks very much for the contribution there. Really appreciate that. But your question was specifically relating to the government scheme for first-time buyers with the 5% deposit and no LMI. So my view is a lot of people are going to get caught simply by this. Bear in mind that property prices don't always go up; they can sometimes go down. We're already seeing that in some areas, and I know that the sort of the spin at the moment is property prices are rising. Well, not universally by far. I think it is quite limited in its capacity to help those that really need the help. And unfortunately, I think it's more designed to support the building and construction sector and the industry rather than actually individuals. So I'm pretty wary of it. I mean, there are some situations where it makes sense. And in my one-on-one conversations, I've had a few conversations with people who, are kicking around this idea and thinking, well, maybe it does make sense, but there are always a bunch of questions you've got to ask. And they are things like, what happens if your income gets crushed? What happens if property prices fall? And what's the real small print? How long is it for? What happens after that? So there are a lot of risks, I think, that people aren't necessarily exposed to. And I personally think that this is something that was done more for optics and politics rather than actually for reality. Now, Edwin, why don't we just pick one of the first examples, and maybe we can kick it around. And
okay, so this was a property that the agent was saying that the brickwork on top of that beam, right after I got under the property, you could see the brickwork in the 60s. In a lot of buildings, strata complexes, small complexes, for one reason or another, this is what they used to do: put the load-bearing beams across the piers, and possibly because of the height, I could actually. That's about 1.5 meters off. 1.5 meters off the ground. And what the agent was saying was that the brickwork that separated the kitchen and the lounge room wasn't load bearing, and they could and that the purchaser could remove that and make it an open plan design, which would be very attractive. Now, a lot of people fell for that BS, but when you have a deeper look and you actually see that it is load bearing, it was a load bearing wall. Obviously, it's carrying the wall of the unit above as well, above this particular unit. So this is the stuff that a lot of agents say things because of lack of ignorance, and because the building inspector allegedly couldn't get access to the subfloor area. We knocked on a few doors and we got the keys off one of the owners' corporation, one of the people that were in the owners' corporation, and we're able to get underneath and we're able to see what what it potentially would involve to remove that wall, according to the suggestions that the agent made. So it's scary because it's. You're going to go through a lot of you have a lot of issues, and if you're purchasing a property again in this climate where there's a lot of FOMO and there's that bidding undercurrents that are at auctions, and you fall for all those lies, all the chatter, all those nice comments that agents make. Well, you're going to come unstuck because your dream home is going to turn into a nightmare.
Yeah, and Edwin, the thing about that one that we just showed, I was also intrigued by all the wiring sort of twisted all around, hanging loose, and all those sorts of things. Which again, it's not best practice, is it? To have bits of and we'll show some other ones a bit later of other examples of where the electrics is, well, frankly, pretty awful. I will just acknowledge Jason. Thank you very much for the contribution, Jason. And in the comment, you actually made the point about that. You've seen a number of people moving into the surveying sector and basically doing exactly what Edwin said was going on. As with all of these things, of course, caveat emptor, when you actually go and get somebody to actually do the job. And Donna, great, we're able to answer your question. Thank you very much again for that contribution. I really appreciated it. So Edwin, electrics, big area of concern.
I just read one of the comments here. It says that somebody's making a comment saying that I need a pick me up. I do look a little bit tired, I guess, but what I need is a shot of tequila. That's what I need. So look. In terms of the electrical, well, that's one of the things that obviously you can't see, right? You can't see when you're buying a property. but there are certain signs that you can look for. First of all, the age of the property is going to tell you obviously the age of the wiring, and you look at the age of the property, and then you start noticing the extra light switches, the extra power point switches that are being added over the decades, and more than likely you're going to get an overloaded circuit board, and most of the older homes ran on one circuit. But you overload that and you start to cook the copper, and it starts to get very, very hot, and the insulation of the wiring starts to get very brittle, and it comes apart. Now, yeah. So okay. So we bought this property, and we obviously made the offer on this property based on the issues that we already calculated, what it would cost. We had a rough guesstimate of what it would cost to get things replaced. And this is why I was able to obtain these videos. What we didn't know was how badly, and what we didn't know was that I mean, the good thing was, I guess, in the last 5 or 6 years of the old girl's life, she lived on her own, so she wasn't using a lot of appliances, and her husband passed away sometime before that as well, and he was the one in the garage using a lot of the machinery. So what it was, Martin, they had the lights and the power on the same circuit, as well as the garage. Had a big garage, and they must have had about 4 or 5 different machines there that will operate from time to time. And on top of that, they also hooked up the pool pump, substantial pool pump, to it, and to the same circuit. So I mean, this thing was just waiting for the fuse to be lit, and this whole place would have come down quick, smart. So, but we knew that we were conscious of the fact that this house had electrical issues, because we looked at at the switchboard. It had the old switches. It wasn't upgraded. The house was built in the in the late 70s, early 80s. So there was a lot of things that already alluded us to have the understanding that we're going to have a rewired anyway. So we took that into account. But some of the way that they've, I'd say, was more like a handyman than a real electrician, that they've connected the wires to power up the machines in the garage, were absolutely diabolical. Like I said, it's a wonder that the house didn't go up in smoke years ago. And some of these things is, like I said, that people don't take into account when they're buying older established homes. Again, they focus on the shiny new stuff. And look, it's easy to replace. When I say easy, it's not that hard to replace light switches and GPOs. But what you need to do is, count them. Have if you've got a rough idea when the house was built, count them, count the switches, and you can see a lot more that have been introduced. I mean, it's obvious. When you've got more than one power point in a bedroom, you know that they've added things, and if they've got a lot of appliances, they've added. And then go to the switchboard, lift the lid. They're not always locked. Lift the lid and see if the switchboard has been upgraded. Because if it hasn't, and you have to rewire the whole house, I mean, you'd be cutting holes in walls in order to get to put the new wiring through, and also to get rid of the old. So it can be a costly exercise. In many cases, electricians get away with using the existing cables, but when they're so old, they've been so hot for so long, and they become brittle. The insulations become brittle. You just have to replace it. And so when our Sparkies started replacing the wiring in this house, we found all those makeshift joints all over the place, and it was just a mess. And like I said, all the circuits, it was all under one circuit. So now it's got they've introduced 3 different circuits into the house in order to for it to cope with the new lights, the downlights, and the and all the the power points that are going to be required.
I'll tell you something, Edwin, that on that same vein, I was talking to somebody the other day who just bought a property, and that property had included an EV charging point for a car, right? And then they discovered that it wasn't put on a separate circuit. It was literally just extended on the end of the normal domestic wiring, which of course is completely stupid. So another example of work not done well, and whether it was done professionally or we don't know, but it was only discovered because they actually got the electrical system tested, and this came up as a major issue because, of course, the EV charging point, particularly if it's a fast one, is a big guzzler of electricity and puts a huge amount of pressure on the circuits. Same also with after add-on air cons, right? So quite often people add on air cons and haven't done the work in terms of actually thinking about the total capacity. So, for example, in my property at Thurrool, it was 3-phase, and the reason it was 3-phase was because it was quite a big property, and it was designed to allow for the installation of air conditioning later. But in a lot of areas, they just stick the aircon in and don't think about it. So there are a whole bunch of electrical and capacity issues, which again aren't often front of mind when people think about things. And as you say, the cables can deteriorate, and of course we in Australia have had specific examples where particular makes of electric cable have actually deteriorated quicker than expected. And you may know that the ACCC was recently involved in a campaign to try and get people to be aware that certain makes of Chinese imported cables were actually defective and need to be replaced. I mean, again, another example of a whole bunch of things that need to be thought through.
Yeah, look, and it's costly because as I said, you gotta be conscious again of all the costs. Some people, for whatever reason, still under the impression that you can get a house rewired, for about $15,000-$16,000, and that's if you're, as I said, if you're lucky and the house is relatively new. When I say new, it's within 20 to 25 years. Depending on what you want and depending on all the mod cons and all the creature comforts that a lot of people are looking for, and like you said, you got your EVs, and you got all these pool pumps, and you got your ducted air conditioning units, and it's taking a heavy load. So you're talking upwards of 25, anywhere between $25,000 and $35,000. Now that's potentially that's also outside of all the extra work that you're creating, for the gyp rockers and the painting crews that are coming after the electricians, because they've made so many holes in the walls that can't get access to certain areas through the roof, or through the ceilings, or through the subfloor areas. So all these things have got to be taken into consideration. So it's these things you overlook, but as I said, there's simple tips. You start look at the age of the home, and look at all the mod cons that they've got around the house, as you say, air conditioning unit, and then count all your GPOs and your light switches, and then go over to the switchboard and see if it's being upgraded, or if it's still got the old ceramic fuses on there, which a lot of properties do have.
Absolutely. Well, you sent one of your pictures.
Yeah, well, you have to get access. So the electricians have to get access, and they have to rip the old cables out and put the new ones in. And as I said, it can be very, very costly on top of the on top of what it's going to cost you to upgrade the whole circuits. In this case, as I said, this case was one of the like originally the plan was to utilize as many or the electrician's plan was to utilize as many of the old wiring, but unfortunately, because there were so many so many different things happening here, the wires were just brittle, the insulation was just brittle, and it was just dangerous, and there was no point because it was just going to if you just do a half-assed job, you're going to end up with a lot of issues in the future. But look, this is now better than a new home, and it's going to have all the creature features that the new owner wants, and it's going to be safe, which is the most important thing. I mean, there's no what price do you put on injury or life?
Absolutely. And one other thing I wanted to ask specifically was about smoke alarms, because of course there's a significant regulation now around smoke alarms and their effectiveness. So is that something that also should be on the radar in terms of when you're making an inspection? Because clearly, from a safety perspective, it's critical, and from a regulatory situation, it's also important too.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't be managing a property without adequate smoke alarms, and you shouldn't be selling a property without a smoke alarm anyway, according to the legislation.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder how many of those actually don't necessarily have the full Monty when it comes to smoke alarms. I've actually been talking to again people in my one-to-ones who were actually wandering around a house, and they found all these smoke alarms with the batteries removed and the connections disconnected because the smoke alarms kept going off.
Well, you see that in a lot of apartment buildings, Martin. You see a lot of smoke alarms that are being the batteries have been taken out, and also you see they've covered them up with thick plastic because of the nature of the cooking habits of the occupants, and then the thing just keeps on going off because there's not enough natural ventilation, so the smoke alarms just keep on going off. So they disengage them, and again it's dangerous. But then the interesting thing is that I learned many years ago is that there are two types. And I don't know how true it is now, but it was true a few years back when this fellow from the fire safety company that we used to get used to do the audits on our rental properties for the smoke alarm audits, and he told us that there were two types of alarms. They both look the same, and you confuse them. One is a heat sensing alarm, and the other one is a smoke alarm. And it's a 50-50 call which one people have put up on their homes without really knowing. And so obviously you're going to, if there's a fire in the property, you've got a heat sensor as opposed to a smoke alarm. Well, potentially you're going to die from smoking. You die more from smoke inhalation than being burnt alive. So they're the issues. And again, I don't know how true it is now, but that was a thought that stuck in my mind. And from when he told us that, when he mentioned that, from then onwards, all our property managers, when I was managing the office, and since then, I would get them to convince the vendors, our landlords, to get the hardwired smoke alarms and not just rely on the battery operated ones from Bunnings.
Yes. Which of course only work if you keep the batteries up to date, which is another story. Now, one of the other issues, of course, and this is a particular agenda of mine, is asbestos related exposure, because of course about 1/3 of Australian properties are still have asbestos in them and are potential sources of asbestos exposure. As you know, my wife died from mesothelioma, and she did some DIY and a few other things, but the point is that this is another very serious issue. Again, quite often asbestos presence in a property is not picked up, and in fact even with a standard survey it may not be picked up. Is that true, Edwin?
Oh, that's correct. And you'd be surprised in how many areas of the home, or how many, you know, the materials in the home contain asbestos. You've got from the old underlay in carpets, in vinyl, the old vinyls. You've got not only asbestos, but you've also got the old flooring used to be treated with arsenic, and you've got the old blackjack. They used to paint the floorboards with to stick the vinyl and stick the underlay with as well. I mean that's very toxic in itself, and yet a lot of people are polishing the timber floors and breathing this shit in. So that you've got the timber flooring that, again, as I said, was literally soaked in arsenic in order to prevent them from being eaten by termites. You've got asbestos in a lot of the old insulation from electrical wiring. I mean, and the list just goes on and on. Your eaves, your water, your wet areas. There's in lo and behold, in the gyprock that was being imported during the construction boom of from 13 to 17, the gyprock that was being imported from China had a tolerance was, I think it was 5 or 7% asbestos, and yet that was that was being bought in container loads because that's allowable in China, but obviously it's not here. But who was testing that, and how many apartment buildings, high-rise apartment buildings, and strata complexes have got this gyprock that contains asbestos, albeit let's say 5% asbestos, and people are hanging up mirrors, hanging up paintings, hanging up photos, drilling, cutting, doing renovation work, and so forth, and they're breathing this shit in. So, and this is why a lot of people get caught out. So it's, yes, asbestos is a major thing, and again, as I said, is in a lot more places than what a lot of people think it is.
Absolutely. 28 different examples I could quote. I won't go through the whole list now. If you want to know more about asbestos and prospective asbestos exposure, go across to the charity that we created in Jules's memory, Asbestos Awareness Australia. There's a bunch of videos there where we go through this in more detail. But you go from the top of the house in the roof, through the wet areas, right into the plumbing, right into the kitchen and bathrooms, as well as, you say, some types of furnishing as well. There's a lot of it around. And you make a very important point there, when asbestos hasn't gone away. So, we're still bringing into the country today, still bringing it in gyprock and things like that, with a percentage of asbestos in it now. It's not actually caught at the borders, and nobody's checking. So anybody who's thinking of doing DIY on a property, you should start from the assumption that asbestos exists rather than it not, and make sure that you can confirm that it does not. And it's quite hard sometimes to identify whether it's asbestos or whether it's not. So just a visual inspection isn't necessarily sufficient. And also, I'd make the point that asbestos actually deteriorates over time. So you might have it in a fence, or you might have it in a garage roof, or whatever, and the official line is, it'll be okay as long as you don't disturb it. But unfortunately that's not true, because it deteriorates. And the final point to make on asbestos, before I get off my hobby horse, because I just feel really strongly about this, is that you only need one exposure, just a few fibers. And by the way, females seem to be more predisposed to mesothelioma rather than males, and it's not just a question of those working in the mining sector or those in the building and construction sector. We've got the third wave now, which is all the DIY stuff, and in fact more females rather than males are being diagnosed at the moment with mesothelioma, and so it's a killer. Killed my wife, and it will kill other people. So there's a really, really important point here when you actually are thinking of a property and thinking about buying a property. Make sure you know what you're buying. And by the way, if you're an investor and you've got a property for let, have you thought about the implications if there's asbestos in the property for the tenant? Because that's another weakness that I'm seeing at the moment. Tenants are not at all protected in this regard either. So that's another big deal. Sorry, I get on my hobby horse now, but I feel really strongly about this particular one. Edwin, another area of concern is mould, of course, and a lot of properties these days tend to have less ventilation because, of course, concerns about heating or what have you. But mould can be a killer too, can't it?
Oh, look, it is. It's a silent killer, and it's just as bad. You could say just as bad as asbestos, and it's debilitating when you end up with affected by it. I did got a mold expert into an apartment that was newly built many years ago, and we took some images with his blue light, some videos, and it was interesting how the bathroom was affected by mold because of the lack of the mechanical ventilation was just inadequate, and the spores spread all the way around the apartment. And when we turned the lights off and he got his blue light out and started walking through the apartment, it was just incredible how the spores had just spread throughout. And the room that was most affected was the baby's room, and in the areas that had the most signs of spores, and you couldn't see it with your eyes, right? You could only see it with the blue light. Was the cot, and all the baby's toys were just covered in mold. And this so once we saw that, we just organised the tenants to be vacated within a day and moved out. It was just mold is another silent killer, dangerous one, and the unfortunate thing, Martin, is that there's a lot of banter between landlords, property managers, and tenants. They blame the tenants for not opening up the windows to ventilate the place. But in my opinion, as a property manager for many years, almost 2 decades, I believe that the issue with mold in apartments is due to the inadequate mechanical ventilation, albeit that the mechanical ventilation that is placed in the units that is used falls under the NCC, but it's not adequate. It's just not adequate to sustain the lifestyles that we live. Not when you're washing the dishes, not when you got dishwashers going, not when you got clothes, washing machines going, dryers going, internal laundries, and there's very little cross-flow ventilation, if anything, and you got this days that you just can't open your windows. You simply can't open your windows because it's just too cold. It's raining. Not only that, but you could be in strata complexes where in areas where crime is an issue, so you just can't leave windows open. But as far as I'm concerned, and from all that I've seen and all the work that I've done, and try to assist our property management teams with, is I'd say it goes back to the inadequate mechanical ventilation, where in a lot of the cases, in most of the cases, in the properties that we manage, we convince our landlords and educated our landlords to basically get rid of the cheap and nasty mechanical ventilation that was put into the laundry areas, into the bathroom areas, and we got more powerful ones in order to have better ventilation in the unit. Otherwise, you end up with mold, and I've seen units that that have been, black. The whole walls, cabinetry work, everything had just been blackened by the effect of mold and it's like a horror movie.
Yes, it is, unfortunately. And of course, mold is in places that you don't often see it. So, it's not just in the obvious places. And certainly from my many years of doing building inspection work years ago, in places like the UK, for example, mold is a big problem too. And that's perhaps rising damp, creating mold on the internal walls as well as the ventilation problem. So it isn't just ventilation, it can also be poor quality construction, it can be damp proof course problems and all sorts of things. So it's a really, really important, the whole issue of dampness and getting it checked is again another important. And I guess the final thing before we close out is, what about the uncertified alterations, additions, changes? And you and I have done a few shows on this, Edwin, but it's worth just putting this in the mix too, right? Because and I know that quite often some of the stuff that has been done has not been done to building regs, has not been certified, has not actually registered on the council. So you could be buying something that is actually not necessarily what it really is.
And this is the whole issue that we've also got, right? And the simple fact that you've got a lot of properties that are being renovated, they've had a lot of work done, they've been prepared for sale, and unless you're really looking and unless you understand, have a bit of an understanding of the building industry, you're going to overlook certain certain renovations that would require and would deem council approval, engineering, planning, and proper, structural engineering planning, and application of construction because of the the extensions that they put onto homes. But look, my advice and my tips, as I've shared before, is if you feel that there's been an addition put on a property, you can tell by the different shapes of the roof line, the different materials. You'll go from a pitch roof to a flat tin roof, and it's incorporated in the area, the living space underneath the flat tin roof is incorporated in the house, so you know that somewhere along the line that the original house has been extended. The materials used, often the case from bricks. You go from bricks to fibro or different types of cladding around on the extension. So the materials change, or even they may have used brick again, but it's a different tone or a different, it's similar but yet somewhat different. So you know that there's been extensions done to the property. So all these things, and if you don't tell your conveyancer or conveyancing solicitor, is not going to make the required inquiry into council to see if approvals have been obtained, approvals have been given. I mean, at the moment, I'm following up on 2 matters with a particular council of properties that are being sold without occupation certificates, and you could say that half of the current dwelling is not council approved. There's no occupation certificate, no DA is being lodged, or if a DA has been lodged, it hasn't gone any further than lodgement, but there's no construction certificate, there's no CC, and there's no occupation certificate as well. And people are paying a lot of money for these properties. So what does it mean to you if you didn't do your due diligence, and if you didn't apply the caveat emptor, buyer beware principle in your due diligence? Well, you could get the council knocking at your door and giving you a demolition order. So what are you going to do when you get a demolition order, and you won't even get what we call a reverse a reverse DA. In other words, try to get professionals, get consultants to give you all the reports saying yes, it's adequate, it falls within the guidelines, blah blah blah, this, that, and the other, and you basically do a reverse DA in the hope and prayer that the council is going to approve what has been added, attached onto the property. But you know what? It's a 50-50 call, and it can be a costly call. The two properties that I'm referring to, I can tell you that one of them is never going to get an approval, and the renovations are very elaborate. I dare say probably cost the vendor at the time before he sold it, probably cost them a couple of $100,000 to put the extension up, but they're never going to get a council. They're never going to get an approval. They're never going to get an occupation certificate when the council comes knocking at the door and telling them and giving them a demolition order. Because I know for a fact from a private certifier that's a mate of the previous owner, very close mate, refused to give him certification because he said there's no way. And when a private certifier refuses to give you certification, you know you're in a world of caca with it. But and these are the things. But if you're not going to inform your conveyancer that there's been extensions, possible extensions, that they've or ask the agent, and the agent arms and ahs and tries to hide things. If you're not going to convey that information to your conveyancer, they're not going to make the proper checks and balances, and you could come unstuck, and it could be costly in the future.
Spot on. But I guess, Edwin, as we sort of come towards the end of the show, all the things we've been listing from, getting building inspections and, all the other things that you need to get tested, and also make sure that the certification's appropriate. You will be competing with people who don't care a fig for this stuff and will just rush in and buy. So, are we being overly pessimistic, or is it the truth that actually these things are so critical that if you are actually going to compete with people who don't care about these things, you might lose the property, but it's probably worth it because the consequences if you get it wrong are so significant? What do you think?
Well, look, and this is why I was tagging a lot and try to bring attention to this whole problem, is because I believe that a lot of people that are making bids at auctions or buying properties and making offers on properties that have got these issues, whether it be structural issues, whether it be defects in the property that aren't disclosed on the building and pest inspection reports, they've got extensions and so forth that fall outside of the roof line, that don't have council approval, and they've done all this. I believe that a good 70-80% that are buying is because they're believing everything that the agent is telling them. There is the 20% that just don't care. They fall in the I don't care category. I just want a place to live for whatever reasons that may be. Obviously, one of the biggest groups that fall into the category are the WeChat chatterers that we often refer to, because they're buying for different reasons, and at the end of the day, they still see a property relatively cheap to where they're coming from, and they've got a lot of money to throw at a property, and they don't really care, and to the point where we spoke a few weeks back of that family that just landed in Sydney, and within 3 days they were bidding over $4 million or so for a property over in the North Shore. So for them it's small change in comparison, and this is where I say to people like to the Aussies, to us that are here basically the worst to the battlers that we're just trying to have a roof over our heads and just live in peace. You just got to be sober about it. You just got to budget wisely, and I guess the advice that I give my own family, the advice that I gave my own son, and now given other family members, is if you can't afford something closer to the CBD, well, look a little bit further afield, and start there. Start your journey, your journey there. As opposed to getting yourself in so much debt into a smaller dwelling that's going to potentially end up with a lot more issues down the future, meaning the high-rise developments that he almost got himself into. So, look, people have got the reasons for buying property. People have got but unfortunately, how do we bridge that issue, or how do we solve, or how do we bring reform to the industry when the industry doesn't want to be reformed, when the industry doesn't want to change its ways, or doesn't want to change course? We're not going to do it, Martin, unless what you and I spoke about, unless we change and we adopt a new remuneration package or system that brings more accountability to the licensed agent. At the moment, there are so many loopholes that agents have found in the legislation, in the regulations, in the new policies that they bring out, that it's scary, but yet nobody really wants to do a thing about it. How do we bring about reform? So unless, I guess what I'm saying is unless you bring reform, and unless you bring you lift the scale, you lift the scale of honesty and credibility, you're not going to change these things, Martin. And we're just selling agents are going to use whatever means they can to sell the property quicker, not necessarily looking after the best interest of their client, of their vendor, and by all means not looking after the best interest of the buyer, because at the end of the day, their vested interest is in themselves obtaining a quick commission. The quicker the better, because they've got to move on to the to the next feeding patch. So we've, to me, that's something that's out there, that each individual has got to make that decision. And at the end of the day, if you overstretch yourself, well, then you're a fool for trying to wrestle a pig and think that you're not going to get dirty, you're not going to get hurt.
Wrestling a pig. First time I've seen that heard as a analogy for buying a property, but it's not actually not bad.
In China, it's something goes something along those lines. It goes something along those lines that if you trying to deal with the incompetence, or trying to deal with stubbornness, it's just like trying to wrestle a pig and think you're not going to get dirty. The pig's going to have lots of fun, but and you think you're gonna win the battle, but all you're going to end up is in a mess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the whole point of this show was to go through some of these areas where we think it's important to do due diligence when you're thinking of buying a property, or indeed if you own a property. And we've tried to explain why it is that some of these areas are pretty important. If you get it wrong and you end up with a property that has structural issues, or a lot of other factors, it's going to mean that the value that you thought you had, you don't have, and you can spend a lot of time and effort and money trying to fix it out afterwards. It's quite difficult quite often to be able to make some of those retrospective changes. But more importantly, you could have ended up paying effectively a lot more than you should have. So as we said at the front of the show, this gives you ammunition in terms of negotiation as well as actually risk mitigation and insurance. But this is not a straightforward issue, and like I said, and Edwin, you've reiterated, there will be people who don't care. They will just go forward. But my mind is, caveat emptor, buyer beware. It is worth doing the work, and even if that slows down the purchasing cycle, even if it means you spending more time and effort getting through to find the right property, once you've got it, you'll know that you've actually ticked the boxes, and therefore, you've got more security for the future. So, to my mind, it's a critical issue, and unfortunately with the low standard of construction we've got in Australia currently, the poor building regulations we've had over many years, and the lack of supply of property, all of those things are putting pressure on the market. And I think it's really important, particularly now when we know there are a lot of poor quality properties coming onto listings, ex-investment properties for example. It's ever more important than before to do your due diligence and make sure you've got all your ducks in a row, even if it takes a bit longer, because it's going to give you the right answer, isn't it, Edwin?
Look, it is, and at the moment we're hunting around for a number of buyers, but two that come to mind is we're specifically looking for properties that need a bit of renovation. When I say they need extensive renovation, as opposed to buying something that's already been renovated. You just got to be careful. Like I say, you've got. Look for the upside. Is the upside going to be that you can turn a 3-bedroom into a 4-bedroom? Is the upside going to be that you can introduce an ensuite into a property without swinging the laundry around that's backing onto the main room, and creating an ensuite out of it, and placing the laundry elsewhere? I mean, look at the upside. Is the upside the fact that it's got issues that people are scared of certain things? Be it termites, be it whatever, and you're going to get you are actually getting a great deal. Look, you really got to dig and search for that upside. But at the end of it also is start looking at who your competitors are in the area, and what type of properties that they're looking for. I mean, the WeChat chatters have a specific type of property that will look for in areas where they want to live, and obviously they have a specific appetite for investment properties where they're going to transform into budget accommodation scenarios. But yeah, look, it's just a time to be sober at the moment. Winter's got another 6 weeks to run, and then we got spring, and there's a lot of things about to happen, and fingers crossed that they start. We start seeing a lot more listings on market. We will see a lot more listings on market over spring by nature. I mean, 2021 was the least amount of properties that I ever saw being listed on the portals for sale, across Sydney, from all the time that I've been in real estate, and we're close. The demand is a lot higher at the moment. But which sort of puts us on par with 2021. But what we saw in 2021, 2020, winter of 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw attrition in properties, being put up for sale. But then come spring, we had a bit of a bounce back, and again, fingers crossed that we get that again this spring. But naturally, I believe we will. So it's just a wait and see. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more that we've got to look out for, and we've got to be aware of than what it used to be even just 5 years ago, mate. It only seems like it's only 5 years ago the nature of buying property was was a lot a lot easier to an extent than what it is now. There are so many things that we've got to look out for, and we also got to look out, and see what this government's going to throw at the market, in order to counteract any falls. I mean, it just play it safe is what I say at the moment, especially for the next 5 to 6 weeks anyway.
Edwin, great advice. Thank you very much. And for those who want more Edwin, we do a Monday show, Edwin's Rant, every Monday for about an hour. So there are plenty of back catalogues there. And I'm sure we'll have Edwin back on for another live show down the track, because it's a very important subject, particularly now, as you say, there are so many shenanigans going on. And so I want to say thanks very much, Edwin, for you spending some of your Tuesday with us, and very, very interesting and informative discussion. So thank you for that. And we'll put links and things below if people want to contact Edwin direct. He's open for conversations. And just before I finalise the show tonight, let me just do this. There you go, doggy cam. So the dogs they're still there in their little beds. You see, I've bought them 2 beds rather than having a longer bed, so that they were a little bit contained. And in fact, the other camera view, whoops, done that wrong. I keep doing that. Let's go back there, then go there. There we go. Nearly right. Yeah. How's that? Edwin, I'm now in your place. What do you think?
I was going, what is this AI, Martin?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Anyway, let me just try and sort things out. Hang on. Let's get that. Let's go there. Let's go there. Okay, I've lost myself. I'm in here somewhere. Hang on a moment, folks. Let me just you see, I'm doing all this manually. That's my problem. Let me go there. Let me do that. Get rid of that. Right, Edwin, you're back. Okay, that's good. So I'm not quite sure what I've done, but I've stuffed up my my studio at the end here. So Edwin, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up with you again soon. And I'm going to close the show now. And just to say to anybody who's still here listening, that next week I'll have Damien Classon on. We'll talk about the markets. And keep safe. I'm just going to have one more try and sort this out, because I should be able to do this. It should be that, and it should be that. Oh, close, not quite right, but there you go. Got the wrong background, but it'll do. So there you go. You can see the dog is behind me here, and I'm now signing off. And it shows you that the switcher needs to have automation, which is my next task. So thanks very much. Take care. We'll see you next time. Edwin, thanks very much for your time too. See you later.